All right, we're live, guys. Welcome,
Good.
Kelson. Welcome, Chaos.
Hello.
Tonight we're
Hello.
talking about the facade, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. We got the chat popped up, so anyone who wants to participate will be interacting.
Mm.
Yeah. So Michael Heiser.
I'm keeping an eye on the YouTube chat.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm just doing tonight. I'm just doing that in the Twitter version. I always forget what they call it. Periscope. I don't know. DLive, that happened for a minute, and then I just never really checked it, so I just feel like, why stream there?
Yeah, it's tough to stream to multiple platforms when you can't really keep track of the chats and all of them.
Yeah, it's not really fair to the chats. Yeah. Yeah. So okay, so how'd you guys first, because I've never asked either of you guys this, I don't think. How'd you guys first find out about Mike Heiser? Was it through his fiction or his nonfiction or what?
Well, okay. For me, okay. So prior to meeting Heiser, he's pretty well known, or pretty somewhat semi-active in sort of the UFO alien field.
Hmm.
As evidenced by him writing this book, but he he was very famous as a debunker. So and he got a lot of people angry because of that, but so for me, I kind of got to know him through that field, through sort of the conspiracy, alien, stuff when I used to believe in that stuff, and he was, and like in that circle, especially for a lot of Christians, it's really messy and just a lot of confusion. But he was kind of like with the like on the topics he talked about, Bible scholarship, divine council, all that stuff. That was that was like a light in the dark, so to speak, and that really helped me parsing, and not only like parsing the biblical text, but also how to approach it, and how to approach other topics like conspiracy and all that. Like I was a pretty heavy-handed believer in that kind of stuff, and it would terrify me, and I would like stay up all night, like genuinely afraid aliens would abduct me.
Sure.
Because a lot of those conspiracy, like they're very convincing, and I wasn't very skeptical, and I wish I was, but a lot of it can be very, very convincing, especially when you don't know how to look for proper sources on what those people talk about. Yeah, and so I kind of bought into a lot of the crap that was out there, and I would just try to fit my worldview as Christian to try and like squeeze the Bible through, and it was just a nightmare. But he kind of helped with that, how to get through that nonsense. And finally I decided to pick up his book because he's an actual academic, right? So he knows how to look for sources and like look for legitimate information. And so it piqued my interest. Here's this guy who knows how to who knows his stuff, and who's really prominent in this field of alien UFO stuff. And I decided to read it, and I really liked it because the quotes that he puts up in the book, like for every chapter that you read and there's a new quote, like he searches for new, like for legitimate information, and that was very helpful. So
Yeah,
that's kind of how I came to him and his works, his writings.
I think I'll go next. I think for me it was I guess it was Sentinel Apologetics YouTube. Though I think I'd seen him on the History Channel debunking ancient aliens, like 8 or 10 years ago. I think that was like probably his first kind of spike on the public scene.
Oh, really?
And
oh, yeah, I remember that.
yeah. And I remember being like, oh yeah, this is that guy. Like I guess he has lectures. That's kind of cool. And then kind of digging into that. I think I was always kind of agnostic about aliens, but I always had an interest, I guess, just kind of growing up in the 90s, being a big fan of the X-Files and stuff like that. Maybe I kind of blocked off that exploring it too seriously, I suppose. But I guess I just appreciate his genuine and long-standing interest in actually engaging the UFO community, I guess, and really understanding them, and just being like a coast-to-coast fan and all that kind of stuff. Like, he's not faking it. Like, he really wants to get to the bottom of this stuff. And it's almost like there's no one quite like him. And he's also genuinely qualified as a, ancient Near Eastern scholar to kind of dig at the ancient aliens source material and tie that into modern UFO theories. And just like, he's just so weird, right? Like, I mean, you could even do all that stuff and still not be as weird as Heiser, because he just decides to put out fiction books too. And I mean, who does that? So I think his passion kind of inspired me. His being as prolific as he is inspires me. His podcasts ate those up. That was about a couple years ago. I just kind of went nuts for his content, and yeah, so that's me.
Nice. Sounds a lot more peaceful than me. A lot more of a less
I don't know.
rookie.
I kind of feel like it. I think getting. It's interesting. Like, you got calmed down by him. I think he kind of riled me up, because maybe there was stuff that I was too. I think I was asleep at the wheel at a couple concepts, and he kind of unlocked stuff that just kind of made me feel a little bit more dangerous in conversations. With the Divine Council things, and like, I was just talking to my mother-in-law just this weekend. She saw that I was reading this, and she's like, "Oh, I like, fiction UFO stuff," and she's like looking up reviews on this guy, and she's like, "Matt, can we have a talk? What is this stuff?" She's like, "I'm really curious, but I'm actually kind of worried that I would get too sucked in, and are you too sucked in? And like, what is this? Like, is he teaching demonology? Like, what is going on?" So like, we got to like chat about it, but yeah, there's like an interconnection that he sits amongst, I guess. That there's a lot of Christians who are interested in this stuff. There's a lot of UFO type people who are interested in this stuff, and they don't often overlap in popular circles, at least. But I think a lot of Christians do wonder about these things. A lot of UFO people do wonder about supernatural stuff, but there's no one who's actually accredited who's like chatting about it publicly in a popular way that people can access, So
Right.
Kelson, what about you?
So with Heiser, I've found his work to be ultimately validating. And I'll qualify that because, I mean, I've been Christian since I was about 7, so close to 30 years. And so I've always tried to look at all the alien stuff through the lens of a Christian worldview. And when we watched a lot of Christian slanted videos on UFOlogy and aliens and things of that nature years back, and listening to the accounts from people that were, abducted or whatever, and where they smelled the sulfur. Wow. And they felt that they were unable to. By the way, spoiler warning, there will be spoilers about the Facade in this conversation. So, much like the people who are victimized by the Watcher / the Colonel in the Facade, they lost the ability to control their physical bodies. They were frozen. And what was interesting to me was accounts where when people would call on the name of Jesus, that was the one thing that could repel these creatures that seemed otherwise invulnerable to human means.
Hmm.
And so I was certainly inclined to believe that there was something demonic about them. And it wasn't until years later that when my mother was looking into a bunch of stuff, she started, and I'm not entirely sure how she got into Heiser, but she read The Unseen Realm, and then she read Reversing Hermann, and I've read part of The Unseen Realm. I'm not all the way through it yet. I plan to finish that, obviously, and then move on to Hermann. But I mean, we've talked about this stuff revolving around the Watchers, the 200, the events depicted in Enoch 1, and for me, Heiser writing about that and insisting on these instances of the biblical text that most scholars and preachers will just gloss over, I found incredibly validating, because it's like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff here that if you look at it through this lens, it makes sense. And not just talking about aliens, but talking about creation, talking about, what was the Garden of Eden really like? What was the being that encountered Eve in the garden? Was it a black cobra coming out of the tree, like as so, popularly depicted?
Yeah.
Oh, I would actually imagine that the Nakash probably looked like a shimmering white Chinese dragon, personally. It's very beautiful. But then again, of course, and Heiser gets into this too, I love how he examines the words that are used, and because the Nakash depicted in Genesis and the temptation, it's not necessarily the adversary, Hasatan. It's just described as a shining one. The word can have several different meanings, but so it wasn't necessarily Lucifer. Could have just as easily been another Elohim acting on his behalf.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you really, when you learn about Mount Hermon and the corruption of humanity that is kind of glazed over in Genesis, but really described in detail in the first few chapters of Enoch. That actually, and I'd been meaning to bring this up in one of our conversations. This hit me a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. I always wondered why the one verse in the Bible that talks about the millennium, it says, swords will be beaten into plowshares, nations will not study war again. What is the significance of that?
Study war.
That is a reversal. That is a total reversal of the secret knowledge that was imparted to humans by Semjeza.
Yeah, sounds legit. Yeah,
because it was Semjeza that taught humans how to make weapons and wage war.
Yeah.
I thought that was Azazel. No,
I believe it was Semjeza.
I remember as he may. No, hold on. Never mind.
You guys would both know more than I would.
You're not.
I have the book lying around here somewhere, but I don't have it.
You're not up on your Enochian lore, bro. That's not fact. I'm gonna correct you. Hold on. I distinctly remember it was Azazel who did that. Hold on.
Might have been that it was Azazel, and Semjeza was the leader of the 200.
Yeah, Azazel made swords, knives, shields, breastplates, metals of the earth, the art of working them. Yeah, okay. Okay, that's... Semjeza taught enchantments and root cuttings. Yes.
Yeah, well, he's part of the problem, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep getting Azazel and Semjeza mixed up.
Well, that makes me wonder if there's a... I mean, does he get that granular in the portent? Because he doesn't in the Facade. We just have a Watcher. but they don't get more specific than that, right?
Well, you don't really get beyond that. I'll tell you this much about the portent. You don't get beyond that one watcher, and halfway through the book, you want to throw furniture at Brian because he has an impromptu meeting with the colonel, and the colonel all but spells out for him what he is.
Yeah, I know the characters are so oblivious. It's like they're not accepting the supernaturalness that's kind of right in front of them. Like, I remember one of the characters in the portent, I forget who it was, but he mentions how the colonel went through a wall, and he was like, oh, well, we're made of atoms, and atoms can move and stuff, or something like that, which isn't really true. That's not how you would go through walls in that sense.
No.
So anyway, it was just kind of baffling.
Yeah.
Like, they have a guy in the portent who's in the wheelchair who can go into the spirit realm. And I guess he's like Dr. Xavier.
Yeah, he really is like a Christian Professor X. That's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's kind of funny.
Oh, by the way, Hound is in the chat, and he says y'all are both right because there's a Azazel section and a Sam Jaja section, and I guess
yeah, I'm seeing what Hound is saying. It easy to do is it's confusing as to which one is in charge between the two.
Yeah.
Amen.
Hound's a nobody. Ignore Hound. No one likes him.
When I first read Enoch, I was like, okay, are Azazel and Samjaza the same being? Why would they have such vastly different names?
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, well, what did you guys think? So, okay, I'm just going to throw this out there. I think of Heiser as continuing, I mean, I guess he wrote this when the guy was still alive, but he's kind of like the Michael Crichton right now for me, where he's a master of the premise. He knows how to set up a plot really well.
Oh yes, Lost. Yeah. Who wrote the Jurassic Park stuff?
Oh yeah. Like the log line for all of his books are like the most interesting things ever, and you always pick them up and you read them front to back. Like I read a lot of them in high school and stuff like this. And I always liked it, but like sometimes it'd be a bit of a slog getting through certain just like character development moments. Sometimes like Crichton would write like it's supposed to be the cool character, and it's just kind of it's a little bit cringe because I don't think Crichton necessarily knew as much range to characters as he thought he did, I guess. Sometimes Heiser kind of reminds me of that.
I actually at some point I want to go back and read Crichton's books because they're such a polar opposite to the movies.
Yeah. I might like them more now in hindsight. Now that so many have been movies.
Which, by the way, I wrote something relevant to Crichton in the chat.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, dinosaurs, Anakim. I don't know.
When I learned how the Watchers and the Nephilim were doing, genetic hybrid experimentations, which ostensibly is actually one of this part of what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, was like a recorruption of human DNA. And that was part of why they needed to be destroyed, ostensibly. But it always seemed to me that dinosaurs did not fit cleanly in any of the animal kingdoms. They seemed like they borrowed features from, some of them borrow features from birds. A lot of them have very reptilian features, but at the same time, you can't tell me a brachiosaur or a triceratops evolved into a bird. I mean, I don't believe in macroevolution anyway. It's just not scientifically sound. Microevolution, yes, but mutation rarely, if ever, occurs sustainably and for the better. And there is no hard evidence of cross-species evolution, particularly in a chemically unforgiving environment. But that's another conversation for now.
Yeah. Well, can we put a pin in that?
Oh, absolutely. You can put all the pins in that.
Yeah.
And then pull the pin when you're ready to discuss it.
Yeah. No, yeah. Because we got I used to get into that stuff, and somehow, and it seems like our chat, where I know Chaos from, the Sentinel Apologetics group, that's been like a common discussion, and there's like some, I guess, a diversity of views on macroevolution. I always get a little, like, my eyes kind of glaze over. Like, I feel like that was like the hot thing in like 2010 or something.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, the four horsemen of the atheist apocalypse are coming, and they all got their macroevolution textbooks out. Like, I better study up. But I don't know.
It was funny though, because the more my mother was reading about, these various points of views on, the Watchers and how they related to aliens, and then how the Greys were actually, they were just like a slave caste, or biomechanical automatons, perhaps something of that nature, and like the ones in charge are these tall blondes, and I'm like, oh, it's the Mayans and the Skadar from Perfect Dark, because the Skadar disguise themselves as tall blondes. But that just kind of tells that, I mean, that just speaks to the productive programming that we get through Hollywood and video games, movies, entertainment, all of it.
Oh sure, it gets diffused. Yeah.
I mean, that's another one of the things I absolutely love about Jupiter Ascending as a story, because you've got like this slave caste of alien creatures that look a lot like Greys. And when Channing Tatum's character describes them, he's like, oh yeah, they were found on this one planet and they were just repurposed as a labor class. They do various wet work and dirty work, things like that. And it's like, at the same time, it kind of implies that human technology in reality is light years beyond what most people are aware. And the Facade obviously nods to that too.
Yeah, which is interesting. So, okay, I there's a question I really wanted to ask you guys. Do you think? Okay, so what's it got on at least the cover of my edition? It says every official document in the Facade exists. Every ancient text in the Facade is authentic. Every historical figure in the Facade is real. So,
same.
This is another thing he does that's just like, oh man, I'm recalling this now. Michael Crichton had a book about global warming, and he literally put scientific papers, like he just like I guess like Xeroxed for the time, like a list of actual academic journals about how global warming is not what people were expecting. And this was like, right around the Inconvenient Truth era, I guess. So people went absolutely nuts, and I think he was kind of blacklisted. I don't think he ever sold a script after that point. But his point was, he's trying to get above the story and tell the actual reader, like, hey, I literally believe the theories that are being proposed by my protagonists, and you really need to actually look into this. You need to get on my level. And I feel like my question is, how much of the UFO government, like the okay, let me make sure I'm getting the terms right. The Operation Paperclip, that whole thing. Do you think that Michael Heiser like actually believes, or is that just kind of there to serve the story? He understands it's a theory, and it's just kind of useful because he presents it. He's like literally putting photos from the 50s, these declassified Area 51 documents, majestic stuff. Does he literally think that it was actually a Operation Paperclip weather balloon, and some people were maybe some Japanese scientists were doing human experiments on people, and they had to do a cover-up by projecting it as a extraterrestrial life?
He might. I mean, that's a good question. I will say one thing. I said I wasn't going to spoil the portent, but I have to say this. In that conversation, that dinner meeting that Brian has with the Colonel, he says something very important to Brian, which underscore this because this pretty much just serves as a summary funnel for all alien and technology related stuff in both books. There are no aliens except the ones we create.
Interesting.
Now, whether or not the Colonel is telling the truth is another matter. But, I mean,
yeah,
it also depends on how you define an alien.
Well, that's part of the problem, right? Because he, this is what kind of annoys me when authors try to get meta and try to actually rise above their own story in the middle of their own story and try to literally tell you like, hey, this is real. Like literally, like go Google this right now. Like stop reading my book and Google this. Is because I can't tell how serious he's taking it. Like I'm fine if it's paperclip. It makes sense. And it makes sense.
Paperclip makes too much sense in my personal opinion. It's actually pretty frightening when you hold it up, and it's like that perfect puzzle piece that completes the puzzle.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because you mentioned the X-Files in the 90s. I didn't even get into the X-Files until a few years ago, and we started watching it. And it's funny because, this was after we had already started down this path of learning all this stuff. And I'm like, they're giving it the extraterrestrial spin, but a lot of this stuff is pretty spot on, actually. It's not, the way they're presenting it is not 100% accurate, but there's a lot of things here being touched on. I mean, they talked about Operation Paperclip and things like that. And actually, what drew me to the X-Files was a video that I had seen on Facebook from, I guess, a more recent episode when they rebooted the series. And Fox just goes on this, he just goes on this tirade ranting about how the government is using alien technology and weaponized weather and, targeted events, mind control, things like that to push people into this, new world order that they've designed. And I'm like, well, it's not actually alien technology. Again, depending on what you consider an alien, by some technical reasoning, Watchers could be considered aliens. They're not of this world. They did come down here and, teach humans things that they wouldn't have otherwise known.
Yeah, that's one of the great. That's one of the things that makes me think of him. Me think of Heiser as kind of a master of the premise, because he's able to connect this idea that, like, how would Watchers be discussed, and maybe how would they want to be discussed in the 21st century, and maybe and the alien, the UFO mythos is the perfect is kind of an ideal world for that. And given that, how would governments want to play a part in that? How could they be led to play a part in that? It's a really fascinating kind of approach, which is really great.
I mean, in Heiser's book, he talks about, Area 51, which I've always believed was real in one way or another. Whether or not Heiser actually believes Area 51 is real, whether there's documentation to support the iteration of Area 51 that you read about, or Mount Weather. I mean, according to a lot of, and then of course there's that base in Alaska. Now, according to sources, there are subterranean bases and networks of tunnels all throughout the continent, and there's like high-speed railways that connect them. Whether or not all of that is true, I certainly wouldn't doubt that it is.
Yeah. So
partially because a lot of this stuff you see in movies, and granted, I'm sure plenty of it is fanciful, but there's also that caveat when you're casting a spell on somebody, and like when you get into the Masonic rituals and all that, you have to tell them what you're going to do to them, which is which is a good explanation for why there is so much predictive programming and entertainment. They will backhandedly tell you what they're about, what they're doing, what they're planning to do, and then it happens.
Yeah.
Which actually really makes me wonder about like that Captive State movie. You know, you hold that up to what the Colonel is talking about their plans to do, and by they, you know, him and the other Watchers, it's like that ultimately they're planning to use the illusion of this intelligent extraterrestrial race that's going to come down and unite humanity by telling them, by the way, you guys are killing your planet, you're a bunch of screw-ups, you have to do things our way or you're all going to die. And actually, we're not even going to give you a chance to die. We're just going to starve you to death or vaporize you all or whatever. Look, just do things our way. It'll be easier that way.
Yeah, yeah. And on top of that, which is a brilliant twist. It's a really dark twist, but it's brilliant. Christians are because they've been primed to understand exactly. They've been given the knowledge of who the Watchers actually are. They're the only people who are resisting on the whole face of the earth. The only people who are pulling back humanity from uniting with the extraterrestrial savior. So it incentivizes humanity to beg the aliens to off Christianity.
Aliens, please. Aliens, please.
Yeah. It's really and that's why I like. Okay, it's called The Facade. It's fun that it takes. Like that's when I realized why he called it The Facade. He doesn't use the word until the very last few chapters, and then he does it 3 times, I think. But the first maybe 2/3 of this book is you thinking the facade is that aliens are real.
Yeah.
And then you find out that is the facade is you thinking aliens are real. There's a layer beneath that where the truth is, I guess, that leads you straight into the content. So
there's actually I found there to be a couple layers of facades that Brian kind of dives through, because first, you know, when this whole group is assembled, or you know, when the team is assembled, not the group, but the team that Brian and Melissa and Malcolm were a part of.
Yeah, not capital T group. Yeah.
And they're given the cover story for what's going on, and then they're told the real intent, which by the way is another lie.
Yeah.
And then it's like peeling an onion, and each successive layer, it's like, well, you're getting a little bit closer to the truth, but it's still a misdirection. It's like nested layers of deception and misdirection.
Yeah. All the while, the is it the Colonel? The Colonel is in the same room with them, kind of, and you just think, well, he's the friend. He's the go-between between the group and the team.
Perhaps it's because I'm a writer myself, but I did not trust the Colonel from the first chapter, and he seemed too nice, and he had this Nikolai Carpathia-ness about him the entire time, and I'm like, I was a little bit taken aback that he was a Watcher, but I mean, it certainly didn't surprise me he was the villain.
I just saw him as Hugo Weaving. That was good.
You know, halfway through the Facade, I started picturing him as Ed Harris with blonde hair, and that made too much sense to try and change it. Hugo Weaving works too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Although Hugo Weaving with blonde hair, I don't know, but I don't know. It's like then like the Colonel appears, Mr. Anderson.
See, I had the problem of picturing him as Jack O'Neill from SG-1, and you tried to get me off of that, and I kind of wish, I guess, I don't know, maybe that made it more surprising at the end, because I was just picturing him as being like the dry, you know, serious but kind of friendly deep down.
Yeah.
You know, under his crusty exterior, this is a nice guy. So I just went with that the entire time and never suspected a thing. I knew that he'd have to reveal a Watcher at some point, and I knew it would have to be someone we've already gotten to know, so that it would actually be satisfying as a surprise. But I didn't see that at all.
Yeah. And I mean, Paperclip is just the beginning. Heiser gets a lot more extensively into Nazi lore per se, like the rumors of secret Nazi bases in Antarctica, and actually the argument that they would have actually gone north rather than south, and the rumors that they had a base in Greenland, and talking about MK Ultra,
that's fun.
and Agenda 21, which is now Agenda 2030, which is still on, by the way, and most people are none the wiser as to what it involves. I mean, it's being implemented at the local and civic level, and most people aren't even aware of it.
Wait, which one's that? Is that what is that?
It's basically a global takeover on every level of government by the UN in the name of sustainability and ecological conservation.
Yeah. Okay.
But like everything else, I mean, that's just another facade. The real crux of it is control of the human populace.
Yeah. He's good at and then at the very end of this book, he kind of sets this whole like Brian's kind of set up as now you have a mission, and it's to educate the populace, and you got to do it by any means necessary, and you've been freed up financially so that you can do it. And then once again, and obviously Brian is the entire story, you can tell he's a facade for Heiser himself as the tall, bumbling, introverted, scholar type.
I'm still thinking Melissa is the one that got away in college.
Yeah, like seductive redhead. It's it's weird. Like he plays with these I don't want to say stereotypes, but this is one thing about characterization in his stories, at least so far in Facade. It's not like these archetypes that he's playing with, like the seductive redhead, the Malcolm, the black guy who's like he's trying to be like, fast talking, he's good with the ladies, and he's always got the wisecracks. But
7'7" Orlando Jones with glasses and a lab coat, and surprise ending, Shyamalan twist, he's actually a Jesuit.
Yeah,
but he's a good Jesuit, which is kind of like a Shyamalan twist inside a Shyamalan twist.
Well, that's what is one of the things that made me really love his twists, is that he was trying and failing for me to do this like the black guy archetype kind of thing. but I liked.
You mean like Barrett Wallace? Zing.
Yeah. Well, like that's like that works when you try and fail. Like, and I'm just gonna pretend like it's intentional, but when you try and when you show a failed, like the black ladies man who's funny, that archetype, if you try and fail at that actually makes a second layered kind of character. And Orlando Jones he's pulled that off in the past in like Office Space and stuff, where it's like, okay, this is a character who's trying to live up, like he's trying to portray himself like X, but he's really Y. And that's believable because this guy is actually a genius and he went to MIT and all this stuff, and maybe he's trying to compensate or something. And then you find out that was a facade, and then that makes it even more satisfying because you're like, yeah, I feel like I always kind of saw through it, and it makes more sense that he's trying to, he's in holy orders, I guess, and just trying to pretend like he's a Mr. Cool. So I actually kind of like that, but I don't know how convincing. I don't know. Maybe Heiser thinks he knows how to write every kind of character, and he thinks he can write that character. But
I mean, as a writer, I will say this: whether you Whether you actually think you can write every kind of character or not, it's maybe, all right, I'm gonna try to write this kind of character. I'm gonna make my best effort of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, actually one complaint that I had towards the end was the big reveal, for Brian and Melissa, who Melissa's secret contact was, and I'm like, okay, we've gone from meta creepy to what are the odds to Last Jedi levels of plot convenience here. He happens to be the same guy who destroyed her life and the same guy who killed Brian's parents. I mean, wow, this guy was just a born home wrecker, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that gets into the whole, and we've briefly touched on this, Kelson, like the whole, I guess the Melissa arc that he was bringing her through, of almost like a what's the Scarlet Letter kind of, like suddenly she turns into a saint kind of thing. No one believes her, but you're quickly won over, and then you're just kind of rooting for everyone else to catch up to your level, and then she gets like this really nice complete package of resolution to her one traumatic event in her life, and that's
I mean that was fine in of itself. I found it a bit. I thought Michael was trying to tie a few too many knots with the same, tie up a few too many loose ends with the same length of ribbon to make him the same guy that killed Brian's parents. I'm not saying such a thing is impossible. It's just, it's one of those things where I might write a scenario like that in my own writing, and then I'd go back and reread it a few times, and I'd say, no, I have to change this because it's just too convenient. It's too tidy.
Yeah. And even if you're gonna pull off something like that, that's at the very end, maybe, and it has to be a character that you don't forget about, which is what I did with that character. I forgot about, oh yeah, she's got someone who comes into her apartment sometimes.
Oh, I didn't have that problem. I mean, I kept wondering who that was.
Yeah.
And I figured it had to be somebody from her past, otherwise they wouldn't have known about Penn State. But then again, you figure the amount of information the group had access to, it's like, well, okay, it could be anybody. I mean, yeah, records are sealed, but air quotes around sealed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm trying to remember, like, so overall, I feel like I think I was too harsh. The first time we chatted, Kelson, like, I think I was a little too harsh on his graphic violence and how I was flinching too much at that. I went back and I read some stuff, and then when there's more violence, I was like, you know what? That's actually it serves the purpose of it. Just kind of shocks you out of the complacency that he kind of lulls you into with just a bunch of people standing in a room trying to dialogue something out, which is what 2/3 of the book is.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, which I can tend to like at times, but I need despite myself, I do need that variety, and he supplies it. But yeah.
Well, yeah, you do need to have some action, and then now this was one area, and when reading the portent, both my wife and my mother had issues with Melissa's character, because I'll put it this way: in the portent, she's more or less like a female version of Brian by that point, which she seems as knowledgeable about the stuff as he is, which, okay, yeah, granted, they're living together. She's doing a teaching job at a college while he's, posting this stuff surreptitiously through, anonymous online accounts from cyber cafes and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's not like she'd be unaware of it, but I don't know. It felt like Heiser spent the first half of the book writing one character, and then after that scene on the tarmac, she transforms into a different character.
Mm.
And I'm not saying people can't have a paradigm shift like that. It happens. I've had several.
Sure, sure.
I mean, again, it just there's character development, and then there's when a character just makes such a hard shift. You're like, okay, I feel like we went from point A to point F.
Yeah. Like I need to I need to not just pity a character's background. Like I need to think that it's actually not overcomable, I think. And I need to feel like it's a serious struggle. And if you're gonna draw a character that far along by a single book's end, I need to feel like it was very hard won, I think. Yeah, which is tough.
I mean, granted, Brian saving her life the way he did, that, it's a very extreme, very jarring experience that could completely, change your outlook on things. So I'm not disqualifying that.
Oh, yeah. It's cute. I guess overall, if I had to use one word, I'd say Brian and Melissa are cute.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
Kind of frustrating too, because I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah. I'm interested in reading. I'm definitely moving on to the portent for sure. I mean, she's pregnant. I got that on the last line.
Yep.
So. Yeah, and what's really interesting about, in the portent, you've learned more about the nature of her pregnancy.
Oh yeah, that's X-Files season 6 or something right there. I don't know if you got that far.
It was much earlier.
Was it earlier? Yeah.
You're talking about where Scully gets pregnant?
Yeah.
Which was a convenient way to get around Gillian Anderson being pregnant for real.
Oh really? Oh, I never dug into the past. That's cool. Yeah, X-Files did it first. I'm sure Heiser's got a different layer going on.
Yeah, which I actually have a question for Chaos. Do you have any thoughts on Heiser's riddle at the end of the portent?
Oh yeah, wasn't it in Hebrew?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping we could chat about that.
I think there was a contest where if you solved the riddle, I don't know, something happened. You won something, I guess. I don't know, free Heiser material.
No, you got a character named after you.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I tried looking it up, and from what I can remember, this was a while ago, but it led me to a verse. I think it was in Deuteronomy. I don't know.
One was in Deuteronomy, I think, and one was in. I think the other was in Hebrews.
Maybe it wasn't Deuteronomy. I don't know. It was. Let me go find it. Let me go see the thing.
Where do you find it?
No, because the one was definitely in Deuteronomy, and I think that one you have to read the ESV version to get the correct verse.
Let's see.
I was excited when I got to the last 2 pages of Facade because he said the bits of paper with the Hebrew on it fell out, and I was like, wait, but Kelson told me I'd have the actual Hebrew. Where is it? And then I was like, oh no, it's in the next book.
Oh yeah, that is actually not relevant to the riddle. That's something different. That's actually that's something that you kind of forget about, and then they figure it out halfway through the book what it is, and it's
okay, neat.
I could tell you what it is so easily, but I don't want to ruin it.
No, this I'll find out soon enough.
Huh, I can't find it.
Yeah, I don't even know how to search for it.
But it, as far as I could tell, it seemed to pertain to the 2 witnesses, and so of course I looked up on Heiser's website, to see if because the contest ended 3 years ago. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, surely he's explained this riddle by now. And no, he has not. Well, he says is that the two witnesses are not the answer. They're just a jumping off point. And I'm like, okay. But at the same time, the nature of that really challenges what you would expect of the two witnesses. And to understand that statement, you have to read the portent.
Is it two witnesses in towards the end of Revelation?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
And once again, just being Heiser, the text is all. Lay aside your traditions and pay attention to the text.
Yeah.
Which that is one of my favorite things about Heiser. It's like don't have any preconceived notions based purely on church tradition. Look at the text for what it is.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
What do you think, Chaos?
Well, I don't think tradition is all bad.
Yeah.
I mean, Heiser's, I don't know his denomination specifically. I think he's somewhat kind of Protestant-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I understand his disagreements, or at least his some of the issues he has with traditions or creeds overall. And that's certainly understandable. But I mean, I wouldn't throw it all out of the window, so to speak.
Yeah,
I mean,
he ends up affirming a lot of traditions. And sometimes I wonder, because he's not a theologian, sometimes I wonder how accidental that is, or how intentional it is. Sometimes it seems like it's accidental, but he's still using traditional vocabulary,
Yeah.
So he'll still say Trinity,
Right.
Well, I'm not saying it all needs to be thrown out. I just
yeah.
There are often, and I've had arguments with there was one Catholic guy I was friends with years back, and we had many an argument about stuff. And I'm like, well, Scripture says this, and he's like, well, we don't just go by the Bible, we go by tradition. And I'm like, okay, that to me seems kind of dangerous. If you have something that you go by that directly contradicts
don't just go with the
Scripture,
Bible.
then
yeah. You've gotten onto Naked Bible podcast, right, Kelson?
Not as of yet.
Oh yeah,
I need to do that.
I think he's still in Exodus. I kind of tuned out the last little bit, been getting into other things, but it's nice. It's always there for you when you're ready. Well, it comes out every week, I think, which is insane. For like a few years now.
I still got to finish Unseen Realm and move on to Herman, because
yeah, Herman
was a good book. Yes.
Yeah,
I like that.
It's an interesting thing, though, the way they talk about technology, and at the same time, if you look at technology through the lens of excuse me, like secret knowledge being passed on to humans from higher beings, how they say there's magic and science and magic. I'd say the line between magic and science is measured by your understanding, because technology, the scientific, what we call science is shorthand for the scientific method, which is basically just a method of discovery, how the universe works through repeatable, quantifiable evidence and results. Technology is a blanket term for means for understanding and interacting with the universe, and to a degree bending it to your will. And I feel like there's always been this supposition that the ancient world was very low tech, like even in the pre-flood era. And after reading Enoch and all that stuff, I'm like, maybe the ancient world wasn't as low tech as people thought it was.
Yeah, well, it wasn't low. It wasn't a low intelligence.
No,
that's for sure. That's the chronological snobbery that we particularly
I always
from.
yeah. I always hate it when people put down ancient cultures in antiquity as primitive or stupid when like they were really smart. Like we have access to tools they don't have today, but man, the ancients were still pretty darn smart. Like, and I don't really like it when, I don't know, just like you said, snobbery,
Yeah.
It's a peeve.
Hound in the chat mentioned Arthur C. Clarke, and so insert Arthur C. Clarke quote here. How about any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic?
It's true.
That plays in.
I mean, come on. Show a smartphone to somebody from the 1950s.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Yeah. Well, it's
I'm gonna just
please
jump off the side of a cliff here for a moment. That was one thing I really liked about that movie with Daniel Craig and Harrison Ford, Cowboys and Aliens. There's such a wacky juxtaposition with, Old West, 19th century, with technology that by modern day standards would seem advanced.
Yeah. Like, I love the idea again. Like, I love the premise. Like, maybe it was a bit rough around the edges. I remember seeing it in theaters, so I don't know if I saw it again if I'd like it more. But I think the balls it takes, the stones it takes to throw something out there and actually produce it.
Oh yeah,
and get Harrison Ford on it. That's impressive. So that's thinking outside the box. And yeah, I mean, wouldn't they call them demons or something? Or
yeah.
So some people
they're like, is it a demon?
Yeah, and that's just like
funny because
70s or something.
It's kind of funny because that all depends on your point of view. Like, one thing I always found comical about like the Halo games, the Covenant all refer to Master Chief as the demon.
Yes. Yeah. And they're the most religious. It's so great. I love, like, there's a faction and it's multiple aliens from multiple worlds, multiple systems, and they're more religious than the humans. I mean, that's a beautiful twist right there. And they see the world through that religious lens more than the humans do.
It's funny though, because now, granted, I kind of stopped short on understanding Halo lore when we got to Halo 4, but it's like because it's kind of like a very convoluted retelling of Noah's Ark, like with the flood, and then you come to find out that humans were actually far more technologically advanced. They were doing what they could to eradicate the flood, and the Forerunners thought the humans were just indiscriminately blowing up planets. So then they sent the humans back to the Stone Age just because they could. Then they realized what the humans were trying to do, so then they built the Halos. And
yeah, it's kind of the old trying to think. I guess it's been done a lot in sci-fi, like Battlestar Galactica and a few others.
It's interesting how many secular media will try to borrow from, biblical and scriptural texts, and I often wonder, it's like, are they actually trying to say something here, or did they just run out of ideas and somebody decided to flip through a Bible and see what looked interesting?
Yeah, it often seems the case. Yeah. Well, would you guys mind if we wrapped it up here? It's been good to chat about the Facade.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be fun to do more of these. Maybe get Hound in here if he's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Preoccupied. He's a cool guy too. I think you might have interacted with him, Kelson, at some point.
I believe he was in that chat where you had Michael Regina talking about preterism.
Yeah, we talked about preterism. Yep.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Which
And I'm gonna
100% do not subscribe to.
Yeah, well that's understandable. I don't think Heiser does either. So for what that's worth.
Actually, I look at belief systems like that, and it kind of reflects something the Colonel talks about, which I believe, I can't remember if he talks about this when he is just basically doing his victory lap with Father Benedict at the end of the Facade, or if it's something he says in the portent. But he says people will be so fooled by the fake coming, they won't expect the real one.
Right.
And
yeah.
I thought to myself, I'm like, so there's a belief system that demands people think, basically postulates that all the prophetic events of Revelation have already played out. I'm like, wow, that's, I mean, I don't know. It's like, what are you waiting for at that point?
Oh yeah. Full preterism is I think it'd be hard to argue that, I think. And that's not what I or Mike Regina hold. Like, it'd be a partial at best. Like there's a layering, like progressive rings of fulfillment, and Jerusalem in 70 AD being kind of an epicenter layer. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly parallels between what happened in AD 70 and what's prophesied to happen. But I mean, one key event that did not happen was that Jesus himself did not descend, stand on the Mount of Olives, and split the city into 3 parts.
Yep, that would be one.
So I would actually consider the Exodus of 70 AD or 80 70 to be kind of just like a foreshadowing of that. And I know the argument Mike kept going back to was, it says, well, these events will happen soon. It's like, yeah, but soon is such a relative term when it comes from God, because 1,000 years is a blink to him.
Well, yes, but we can't assume. We don't want to lean in either direction, right? Just on that language, maybe we want to lean in that direction if he says this generation shall see it come to pass. That sounds like a little more pushing for a human chronological soonness. But you're right. I mean, soon isn't enough to really hang your hat on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, generations, it gets a little bit trickier. I look to like the genealogies in like the Pentateuch, and then even in the Gospels, where they're clearly skipping over generations, just kind of giving you like generational keyframes.
That's a good point. Yeah, and Heiser kind of broke that open for me too. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's the rebuttal, honestly, but it's hard to see. It's hard to see the destruction of the, not just the building, but the entire the restored the entire priesthood system that so many Old Testament books like Ezra and others were foretelling and praising the restoration of. You know what I mean? Like in God himself, like so many prophets were speaking God's approval of this restored system, and then the whole thing like literally, crashes to the ground 40 years after Jesus's death.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be some kind of, like, if Jesus didn't foretell that at all, I mean, you wouldn't hold that view, I'm assuming. Like, on some level, he's talking to that generation. On some level, he's predicting, he's prophesying something that's going to actually happen to the that sacrificial system, right?
Yeah, I have to. I mean, I know there's still talk about, the rebuilding and rededication of the temple in Jerusalem, which, how that reconciles with, just the various claims over the Temple Mount, which is a huge controversy in and of itself. And then, of course, you have the secular state of Israel versus the religious remnant of Israel, which, I mean, that's a huge can of worms that in and of itself most people aren't even aware of.
Yeah, and I think people talk past each other on these topics. With I mean, whether you're holding to preterism or not, there's a lot of. I mean, I saw a buddy throw this around just today with the whole like replacement theology kind of stuff. That's kind of a term. It's kind of a label that millennial types will sometimes. Not saying you do this, but it's just kind of an easy way to dismiss what people are saying from a covenantal perspective, more of a preterist perspective. I don't think anyone's arguing. I mean, maybe Nazis are arguing this, but I think a lot of people are saying that the Jews are being replaced.
There are churches and groups that do believe that the Western Church is the new Israel and that the Jews are basically irrelevant at this point.
I think there's some Roman Catholics that think that too, from what I'm seeing on the YouTubes. But I don't think it's the Presbyterians, at least so far. And they're usually the preterists, partial preterists. But yeah, those are Roman Catholics. I don't know what they're up to. And Eastern Orthodox have a lot of particularly weird things to say about modern day Judaism that weirds me out a little bit.
See, I'm free form. I don't claim a denomination.
Yeah, that's fine. That's very Heiserian of you.
Which is appropriate considering I've been to just about every denomination of church there is in my lifetime.
Yeah. I
mean, I've been to the first church we went to, the church my mother got saved in, was Episcopalian. Granted, the father there, the priest there, he was actually, my mother believed he was actually born again because I mean, you'd actually get the gospel message there in not the typical way one would expect to hear it in a traditional Episcopalian service. It's like he had actually preached the gospel message at my father's funeral, and that was what drew my mother to go to his church in the first place.
Oh wow.
Whereas my father's mother, when she died, we went to her funeral. That was up in New York, and so that was an Episcopal church too. But then, of course, he's like, well, I believe that she's in heaven because you could see the love of God in her face. And I'm just sitting there stone-faced, but internally I'm kind of having a Harrison Ford Force Awakens. That's not how salvation works.
Yeah. I think in terms of like American or just like North American, maybe evangelicalism, there's a lot of traditions that aren't understood as traditions because they're not wrapped up in like, hundreds-year-old, they're not called traditions.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? But they're traditions none the same. And I don't think a lot of people are trained to think through these traditions because they're told like, oh, I go to Independent Baptist Church or this or that. We don't we're Bible only here, and they don't realize that I mean, that's the thing, like you can't, we got a 2,000-year-old book that we're calling scripture. Like there's a necessity for traditions on some level, but if you can't self-reflectively walk yourself through those, you're gonna get yourself stuck in trouble. And America's famous for coming up with new traditions and new religions even all the time. We're the hotbed of heresies.
And new reinterpretations of the old. I mean,
yeah, revisionist nonsense. And yeah,
I mean, okay. When there's a controversy that comes up in the news about a desire to, construct a recreation of the gate to the Temple of Baal, it's like, how full circle are we coming as a civilization?
yeah, yeah, yeah. We got
Anyway,
problems.
I should probably shut up because I'm hogging the microphone as usual.
No, you're good, man. You always bring the insights. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Chaos. It's good to
Yeah,
talk
no,
to you.
it's good. It was fun. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Cool. Yeah, well, if it's cool with you, we'll I'll hit you up again if you want to talk about another topic, or I can once I buy the portent, I'll probably want to chat about it with you.
Yeah, I'd like to. I'm more interested in comic stuff, if that's okay with you. So, like, you seem to be really into that, and I've been considering, like, I really want to get into the film industry myself.
Oh, no kidding.
But yeah, but I'm also like tempted to explore the comic industry, and I've been getting more into comic books and learning, like, like, I guess my overall career goal is to be a writer. So for film,
Awesome.
it's script writing and all that, and I'd like to write a book one day, and I have a lot of ideas for a lot of stuff for lots of stuff. But comic book stories are something I'm really up for. So that'd be a cool talk to have about that.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
We need to get this guy in on your Kyrie chats, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we if you're available this time next week, maybe we can chat again. We can just talk story. Kelson is a very talented fiction writer too, sci-fi stuff.
Oh, that's nice.
Some fantasy elements. You can speak.
Yeah, I'm working on it's like a science fantasy story.
Oh, sure thing.
Set in world. It's like a fantasy world, but yeah, amateur writer, professional graphic designer by trade. I do writing in my spare time. One of these days, it may bring in some money, but as I stated to Matt, I think in our last chat, which was 2 weeks ago, the priceless aspect of it on the MasterCard commercial would be the fact that I don't have to depend on the franchises put out by Hollywood or video game developers, because I have my own fictional world to vicariously lose myself in at will. So I don't have to depend on what happens with other people's fictional worlds and whether I like this.
I love that.
Or not.
There you go. There you go. People have lost it. They think they like stories, and that means they're just going to consume it. But you could be creating it.
Yes.
You're off the grid, Kelson. You've broken outside the circle. You're making your own stories.
I'm as off the grid as I can be in most regards. I'm probably spending more time interacting on Facebook than I should be the last few days. And it's like, I need to get the hell back off here.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Get Discord.
I have Discord. I actually just I just joined Discord a couple of days ago. I haven't really done much with it yet because I primarily use Firefox as a browser, and Discord blows that up. It's like processor on my computer heats up and the fan starts going like a race car.
So are you using the browser version?
Yeah.
Oh, you can download it.
I may have to do that.
Yeah. Just do it as an app. Yeah, either on your desktop or on your phone. It works pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to try it on my phone.
Yeah, and we got some cool cats in our Discord. I've been there about a couple years now. So some cool people.
Nice.
That you can distract yourself all day and night having interesting conversations with these people
These
like
lovely
myself.
chaps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we always do have interesting conversations for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you'll have more of the same there. Yeah, if you get on there, you'll enjoy it. It's no Facebook.
No. Hey, one thing I was going to say in regard to comics, because I had thought this when reviewing one of our chats from months ago. You know, when you asked me if I was ever into reading comics, and it's like, no, but at the same time, yes, just not the type of comics most people think of when they say comics nowadays. I don't know, most people who say comics, they think, oh, you know, Spider-Man, Batman, X-Men, you know, Marvel, what have you. And I was like, I never really got into those when I was younger, but I was a huge fan of a lot of the comics that you'd read in the like the Sunday funnies, and my favorite in particular was Calvin and Hobbes.
Oh yeah, I mean that we all grew up on that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield; those are my two favorites. And honestly, I could collect every comic that Bill Watterson ever did, and I would be happy because I grew up hyperactive, ADHD, so I completely identified with Calvin. I just didn't have his vocabulary when I was 6.
Yeah. Yeah. He was quality. He's one of a kind, that Watterson.
Yep. Yeah.
And now he's some recluse out in Vermont or something.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because every single piece of Calvin and Hobbes merchandise goes against Watterson's wishes. He never wanted his characters made into marketing material.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there isn't any merchandise except like
not official. It's
the
all
peeing
bootleg.
on the yeah, the praying / peeing on things. Car decal from the early 2000s. It's bootleg. Yeah.
Yep. I had actually done a drawing a while back. I don't know if you ever saw it. I think it might be on my Facebook page. It's basically I drew Sonic as Calvin and Tails as Hobbes, and then I wrote Sonic and Tails in that style of lettering.
Oh, nice, cool. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that. I'd like to
I always wanted to do more with that. I just never got into it. And I think that's a better looking Sonic than in the movie trailer.
Oh man, that was scary.
That's a polite way of putting it.
Oh wow. That will haunt my dreams forever.
Oh, yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah. Every once in a while, Hollywood delivers a good laugh. And
unintentionally.
And then you remember they're good for something. Yeah. Well, okay, we're gonna we'll stop here. It's been a good hangout session. Thanks for
always.
Thanks for jumping in, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And thanks for those who were checking this out. Thanks for Hound in particular. Lighting up the chat.
My boy Hound.
Always enjoy your contributions.
Yeah, he is a mind to mine if you ever get a chance to, which he will in the Discord.
Nice.
Yeah, so thanks to anyone who's checking this out, and we'll catch you this time next week. God willing, we'll see what sort of chat we come up with then. Let me bring it back and catch you guys later.